Okay, so after all the testing and after all the crashes and the tweaks here and there, I settled for 4.2 gigahertz at 1.235 volts. I had it set for 4.2 gigahertz at 1.23 volts, but I got, there was one time I started it up and I got an unexpected crash, like it couldn't start up, so I decided to up the voltage by 0.005, which I guess was enough because I haven't had that error since then. And everyone from the forums and a lot of people from Reddit, they tell me that with the temperatures that I've been getting, even under a Prime 95 stress test, I was getting about 60 degrees Celsius max after a couple hours of testing. So at the temperatures that I was getting, people on the forums were telling me, and on Reddit, they were telling me that I could go push it up to 1.4 volts and see how high my voltage can actually, my clock can actually get. But I figured, I'm a beginner and I can't really afford new parts if ever I break something. So I decided to not stress the machine so much. You don't really get a lot of performance boost for gaming for overclocking, and I can show you the numbers later. So I decided not to go with a full on complete overclock. So let's look at my numbers, at my results. All right, so testing on Cinebench, the factory clock of 3.5 gigahertz, I was getting a score of 417. And then overclocked 4.2 gigahertz, I was getting 620, about 620, 614, something like that. I tested it a few times and then averaged out to get the result. I had an increase of 48.68%. Now, this is, of course, a synthetic test of Cinebench, which renders out like I think it's a ray tracing scene just using the CPU. So 48% increase. On Unigen, at least I think that's how you pronounce it, Heaven Factory Clock, I was getting 2,170, average FPS of 86.1, and at overclocked, I was getting 2,450 with an average FPS of 97.2, about a 12.9% increase in performance. So not bad, not bad. For Catzilla, I got as the overall result on the factory clock, it was at 31,206. The physics test, which is the only thing, or not the only thing, but one of the major things your CPU contributes to gaming performance, I scored a 785, overclocked. My overall score actually went down. Of course, there are a number of factors. Maybe the system was running a little hot, something like that. Went down by a minimal amount, 2% at 30,574. But my CPU test increased by 66.11% at 1,304. Let's try it out on some games. This is Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. They have that game has a built-in like benchmarking test. So I was at the factory clock, I was getting minimum FPS of 71.99. Overclocked, I was getting 10% less at 64.67 frames per second. So again, many factors. And this is something I tested out like three times and then averaged out the results. Average FPS 109.81 on the factory clock. Overclock, I was getting 109.84, 0.03% increase. Not a lot, but not a lot. Actually, it's practically null. Right, for my maximum FPS, I was getting 161.61 on factory clock. Overclock, I was getting 168.13, 4% increase. Pretty useless if you're getting like 10% less minimum FPS. So I tried the Resident Evil 6 benchmark. So this just gives you like a score. My factory clock of 3.5 gigahertz, I was getting 8,670. Overclock, I was getting 8,717, a 0.54% increase in performance. So I think actual game performance, this really wouldn't matter. But let's look at the other benchmarks. Another benchmarking tool that I have is the 3D Mark Time Spy. For the graphics score, at factory clock, it's 4,329. Overclock, 4,412. An almost 2% increase in performance. The CPU overall test, the CPU test score was a 28.84% performance increase. So that's good. The overall score was a 6.31% increase. So I guess that's kind of negligible when you're actually playing a game. For the graphics test 1 and 2, I was getting sub 30 FPS, but for the first test, I was getting 1.52% more frames per second, and in the second test, I was getting 2.27% more frames. The CPU test, also in FPS, I was getting 28.76%. So for the processes that your CPU is working on for games, really the only thing that's going to start increasing. For Firestrike, which is another, it's another like test on the 3D Mark app. Overall graphics score is 15,320, decreased to 15,282. 0.25% decrease, so not much. Physics test, as the same with the other tests, I was getting about the same amount of increase at 24.67%, though a combined increase in performance of 12.34%, and an increase in the overall score of 7.29%. So not that bad. Like I'm getting about 10% overall improvement in most tests. For the graphics test 1, about 0.2% increase. The second graphics test was a decrease of 0.6%. The physics score, as we expected, increased by 24.66% for a combined test improvement of 12.36%. Now let's go to actual games that I've been playing. I'm doing Marvel Heroes. Now, I've been told that Marvel Heroes doesn't really rely on the CPU that much. And it kind of shows, I guess. Minimum FPS, I was getting 64.25. A lot of factors kind of played into this because I was recording. I was taking 60-second samples from Midtown Manhattan, which is a patrol in the game. And there are a bunch of things that happen. So I guess when I was doing the tests, it was a boss fight, or there were other characters with a lot of particles flying around, so that's why there's a huge decrease. But it's a 13% decrease in the minimum FPS. I was getting about a 23.28% increase in average FPS and about 14.55 maximum FPS increase. For Overwatch, which I've been reading in the forums, really uses up your CPU. I think I've read somewhere that someone was clocking at about 80 to 90% usage of the CPU during gameplay. I have yet to see how much it uses of mine, but as you can see with the results, minimum FPS, I only got about a 3% increase. Average, I even decreased by 5%, and my maximum decreased by 12%. So I don't know if my overclock was affecting my performance. I hope not. I don't think so. Because I was doing the same method. I was taking 60-second samples from gameplay, and then averaged it out. But all in all, if you're looking to overclock your CPU for gaming purposes, you really won't see such a big performance boost. It will really only affect like physics simulations, probably particle simulations, stuff like that. Maybe not even particle, just physics. I'm not sure, but not a lot. Like most of the processes in your game are still handled, at least the graphics, they're still handled by your GPU. So what do people overclock for? I did it just because I bought a 6600K, which is an overclock unlocked CPU, and if I didn't overclock, I'd be kind of wasting my money. So I went ahead and overclocked it. Another reason for me personally is because I wanted to be able to say that I've done it. I know it's a stupid reason, but it's something that I've always wanted to try, and now I have. And I realized that it's kind of not worth it. I also bought the cooler for it, so might as well. You will get some performance increase when you are working with video. When you render stuff out, it kind of usually uses the CPU. So there will be increase in performance in rendering stuff with your Premiere Pro, with your Sony Vegas, or even probably your 3D applications like Maya or GIMP. No, not GIMP, Blender. So if you have a 6600K or 6700K unlocked processor, might as well do it. It's really easy, but you have to be prepared to do a lot of testing and to make sure your system is stable. Now I want to hear from you guys. How about you? What was your first overclocking experience like? Did you encounter the same problems that I did? And what kind of performance were you able to squeeze out of your CPU? Alright, thanks for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.